Another weekend filled with protests across Kansas City. 6:05. Good morning. Glad you're here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. And now, once again, we get great audio here in Kansas City of people standing down on the plaza, protesting Donald Trump, protesting Elon Musk, and frankly, not sounding like they know what they're talking about. I watched every local TV news package on this over the weekend into early this morning. And I sat there and I thought to myself, gosh, if I could go out and pick people from a crowd of a couple hundred folks and use them to actually benefit what I think is smart policy, what I think is good policy on behalf of the American people, these are the individuals I would use. So thank you to, first off, Channel 9, KMBC, finding some outstanding, tongue-in-cheek, residents around Kansas City who are clearly out of touch with what is happening in the moment as they protested down on the plaza on Saturday for what they called the hands-off protests and rallies that happened not just in Kansas City, but all over the country. And here's what it sounded like.
They say the issues are too many for signage.
I'm worried about our kids. I'm worried about their education.
I'm really nervous for the people that have less money.
Democracy is what it's all about.
There's too much.
Worried about the kids, worried about education. Democracy is what it's all about. Yeah, we did this whole democracy thing on November 5th, and the results were the results. And I know that that may be an inconvenient truth for some of you, but we did do that whole thing like 4 months ago. And that's why the people who are in power right now remain in power. Now, there will be a chance for you to remedy what you believe to be a poor selection by the American people come next year. But, trust me, we did this whole democracy thing. Technically, I know someone's going to text and be like, Constitutional Republic, just wanted to remind you. Thank you. Yes, thank you from the back row. Very much appreciate that. You get the point. We voted. And for many of us, we knew exactly what was coming. When it came to DOGE, when it came to cuts to the federal government, the lack of sustainability of federal government growth over the last 4 years was going to drive us off of the fiscal cliff, was going to ruin the nation. And now we are trying to fix some of that and roll some of these numbers back when it comes to federal jobs and others to 2019 levels. That's it. That's the goal here. Just roll some of these numbers back to where they were 6 years ago. But the protesters are out there on the plaza on Saturday, and frankly, most of them had no idea what they were there for.
It's under attack right now.
Others say they wanted to be here to protest the latest rounds of tariffs. They say this last week has hit Americans hard, especially those that count on their retirement.
My parents have lost all of their 401k. I have to start.
Wait. Your parents lost all of their 401k? Says woke Karen. What were they invested in? That they just lost all of their 401k. I mean, yeah, I'm not looking forward to looking at the 401k today. But what is she talking about there,
Well,
John?
they lost their 402k as well. So, they're double.
Yeah.
All over again, and they're nearing 70.
It has decreased my particular 401ks by at least 20%. So that's the money I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to recover.
I know you probably are going to be shocked by this, but that gentleman talking to Channel 9 was probably give or take 70 years old. If you are 70 and you are riding the stock market and riding equities right now, that's on you there, Bob, old Bob boy. You should not be 70 years old riding the ebbs and the flows of the stock market right now. I'm not Mark Falter, okay? I'm not pretending to be Mark Falter, our buddy at the Retirement Income Hour. But I know this much. If I'm 70 and I'm retired, I am not sitting here saying, dang it, the markets are down 20% and now my net worth is off 20%. The whole point is to be in a place where you're reallocated and not worrying about the ebbs and the flows of the stock market. Someone like me in my mid-30s, I can sit here and just say, oh, man, that stinks. But, hey, if you don't sell it, you haven't lost any money. That's the other part of this that needs to be factored into the equation. And if you're like this guy and you're 70, it's like, bro, what are you doing? Call up our buddy Falter. Take care of it. That's a bad strategy. And that's on you, my man.
Hands-off group lining every corner on the plaza for hours. They say nationally, this is the only way to get their message heard.
We're not sure how to get the message across. Every day we contemplate what can we do.
I've got 2 daughters and a son, and I want them to have the same rights that I have today.
It's important that people show up and say that what's happening is not okay.
I think we need to be out here and we need to say what's on our mind, because this is our country, too.
On the Plaza, Alan Show, KBC 9 News.
Woke white lady stands on the plaza wondering if her 2 children will have the same rights that she has today. Where do you make this stuff up? Is this why you took off late last week, John? Were you prepping for your... Did you
Making
have to get
signs.
Okay,
yeah,
all right. You had to finally pick out an outfit for the big protests this weekend? Is that what it was about?
Once again, there were so many, I couldn't decide what to wear.
Happens every time.
We had the one on the jail. We've got the one on Doge. What else? Is probably the Tesla one's still going on. I haven't checked the schedule.
I'm sure.
The Sporting KC manager, which they won this weekend.
All right.
So
all
that
right.
worked out.
All right. Very well done. So we had protests far and wide across Kansas City this weekend, according to all you guys. And I know it's tough to pick and choose which ones you want to go to, right? The good news for me, when you got 3 little kids, you don't have time for this crap. You got like real life things to worry about.
We'll do the one on the plaza because we can get lunch after,
yes,
right?
That's right.
Nobody goes out to Tesla, where you got McDonald's and Popeyes.
Yeah. Hey, you could walk a little bit further, go to our buddy Jasper's, but
but that's a hoof.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. These people are not big on getting their steps in, I don't think.
No.
That's right. 913-408-7957. Pete, I'm 60. And I still see this downturn in the markets as a buying opportunity. Oh, trust me, it can be. Listen, if you know what you're doing, absolutely, you can make a lot of money right now. I'm not sitting here celebrating the market being down. Nobody is, right? But this is a broader conversation. And here's the biggest problem for these protesters down on the plaza. They're not protesting one thing. They don't have a unifying message. It's just like whatever the anti-Trump narrative is of the moment that they're latching onto. But that's the fascinating part to me. You listen to all these protesters in that Channel 9 package I just played, and they all have these different things that don't really have any meaning. Some are tariffs. Some are, I hope my kids have the same rights as me, which is just made up gobbledygook. You got everybody down there with like a different cause, and here's the only theme. The theme is Orange Man bad. That's the theme. And God bless them. It's America. It's their First Amendment right. I'm just sitting here and saying, if you're trying to persuade people, and that's the goal of these, right? The goal is to create enthusiasm amongst their base going into next year. You've got midterms, everything else. And create the narrative and create the storyline that people who maybe did vote for Donald Trump are turning on him, or there's this grassroots enthusiasm against this administration. That's what it is. And then, of course, the media covers it. They use the media to further that narrative. And then people see this and say, oh, gosh, wow, look at all this massive amount of enthusiasm against Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge, but they don't have a message. There is no message. The message is what it's always been and what it will continue to be. And that isn't to say that Democrats cannot win the midterms. Frankly, I would put money on them, doing pretty well right now, probably taking back the House, because history would suggest that's what ends up happening when one party has all the power. But my goodness, it's not what they're making it out to be right now. When you look at local news and you look at some of these protests, these hands-off protests that took place in 50 states around the country, including down on the plaza. 913-408-7957. Now, what is President Trump saying ahead of the markets opening up later this morning? Thursday and Friday were bloodbaths in the stock market. The president has a new statement out, and you do not want to miss what direction he is taking this thing next on 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. 25 minutes ago, the President of the United States put out a statement here on his Truth Social. Of course, the markets had a brutal couple of days Thursday and Friday. The Dow implied open. The futures are right now down about 600 points. So when the futures opened up last night, they were off about 1,500. So the futures are rallying, and the open is not anticipated to be nearly as ugly as we thought it might be when we went to sleep last night. But the president writing here, oil prices are down, interest rates are down. And then he puts in parentheses, the slow-moving Fed should cut rates. That's a little message to his buddy there, Jerome Powell. Food prices are down. There is no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. This despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariff by 34%. On top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs, plus, exclamation point in parentheses, not acknowledging my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. They've made enough for decades, taking advantage of the good old USA, writes President Trump. Our past leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again. That's what he said there.
Such a nice man.
That was just now on Truth Social from the President of the United States. Oil prices down, interest rates are down, and there is no inflation. That's the message this morning from President Trump. Markets set to open up in a couple hours in the red, but not as ugly as it was expected to be as of late last night. So, how is the president reacting to obviously a historically bad run for the markets? Well, he was on Air Force One last night. He spoke to the media, and he basically said, hold on to your hat. I am not changing course right now. And frankly, even though I think a lot of us are looking at this and saying, how is this going to play out? That is the right thing to do right now. You cannot show your hand. Trump can't stand up there in front of the world on Air Force One and say, oh, boy, I didn't see this coming. These markets are really jittery, more than I expected. He can't show weakness right now. I mean, he has had this economic vision for 40 years. He's now implementing it. He believes it's going to help build up and reestablish a middle class in this country. That's why he's doing it, okay? He's not doing it for his rich buddies. Now, you can get rich trading this market, but he's not doing it to make wealthy people wealthier. That's not the goal here. So when he's asked last night on Air Force One about, paying for the markets, well, in classic Trump fashion, here's what he said.
Pain in the market, at some point you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I don't want anything to go down. But sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. And we have such a horrible, we have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars is pouring into our country. On a monthly basis, it's pouring, it's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out, and our country will be solid and strong again.
So Trump's not going to get up there and say, yeah, he's not going to say either of these two things. One, yeah, the market's going down. I love that. Or two, yeah, these markets have me kind of concerned about my economic policy. as only Donald Trump can, with a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. He goes, I think your question is so stupid.
She's a real beauty.
That's what he says. And then he goes on to explain why he's doubling down on this. And frankly, as much as I'm kind of sitting here, I think many of us are, seeing whether or not this can work, we know that he is trying to reestablish a middle class that has been hollowed out in America for decades now. Is this the best way to go about doing it? I don't know. But I know the intentions are right. And I also know what the other guy did over the last 4 years did nothing but destroy the middle class. I do know that Joe Biden's policies from 21 to January of 25 did nothing but goose the equity markets, make the wealthy much wealthier, and then also try to build up a working poor that was super reliant on the government because their wages were not keeping up with inflation. So under that administration, the goal was to create this very wealthy upper class and a poor, increasingly poor section of the country that needed the government to then create a monopoly for his own political party that potentially could never lose. And Trump's saying, we're not doing that. We're going to try to bring back some middle class wealth here to this country. If we want to remain a robust country, we need a robust middle class. Will this work? That remains to be seen. Stephen in Kansas City, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, I know it's not very Christ-like, but, boy, it's kind of fun to hear all these socialist boomers from back in the 60s whining on the plaza about their 401k when they're in their 70s. Let me play amateur Charlie Gasparino here. I'm with you 100%. I think what's going on here, and Netanyahu and Vietnam have already capitulated along with 50 out of 150 countries, and they say they want no tariffs, which is something that's not being reported. I think this gambit is what's going to be happening. Is he's waiting for all these countries now to come to him and say, we're going to reduce tariffs on our own. We're not going to wait for our country, our other countries to do something. So whether this will work, I think it's all negotiation. I think it's all flexible. And I think it's 1/3 of the way working so far. And if people got to take the hit out of the super rich have got to take a hit that have hollowed out this country via manufacturing, then it kind of feels good to let them do it. I mean, it kind of feels good to let them feel the pain that we all have felt. But that's my take. I think this is all.
Well, not bad. Not bad when it comes to amateur Charlie Gasparino. Not bad there, Stephen. Nice job, buddy. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.
We'll get to more of this. 913-408-7957. Your reaction, plus what's to come tomorrow in Kansas City that you don't want to miss next. Kevin will be walking into the show, and the markets will be in full swing. So we are obviously monitoring what could be another historic day in the markets after Friday was just an absolute bloodbath. Dow closing off more than 2,000 points. But, of course, as has been discussed extensively over the last couple of days. And, listen, we've talked about it on this show for years now. Wall Street is not Main Street. The stock market is not the main indicator of the economy. If it was the main indicator of the economy, Kamala Harris would have cackled her way into the White House. That did not happen, thank goodness.
God save the Queen, man.
Okay? So if everybody voted based on the stock market, this country would look a lot different today than it does right now. That's a fact. It's not an opinion. That's a fact. But remember, the top 10% of Americans hold 88% of the equities. The goal here, though, is to not redistribute wealth, right? It's not to say, oh, well, we've got to give somebody else's shares of Apple to somebody else. It's not like right-wing socialism. It's just to say and make the point very clear and very obvious that, yes, we want the stock market to go up, but the stock market is not the indicator of the economic strength for 90% of this country. It is for 10% that own 90% of the equity markets. But for 90% of Americans, it's not irrelevant, but we want to get them to a place where they are growing their share of equities. That's the kind of economy that you want to try to create. You want to allow all Americans to experience the wealth that can be generated from the stock market. And we don't have that right now. It doesn't exist. Scott Besson talked about this over the weekend. The top 10% of Americans own 88% of the equity markets. 40% owns the other 12%. The bottom 50% have nothing. Absolutely nothing. 913-4087-957. Let's say hi to Walter in Spring Hill. Go ahead, Walter. You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And we've been doing this for decades, and the middle class has basically been decimated. So why not give President Trump's plan a try? It can't be any worse for the middle class than it has been the last at least 2 decades that I'm aware of. So why not?
And that's where I think a lot of people are at right now. No one's doing cartwheels, thank you, Walter, because the markets are doing what they've done the last couple of days. But when you look at the longevity of the country, and frankly, if you're a Republican voter and you voted for Trump and now you're maybe like on the fence because of all this, if you care about the future of the party cannot be outflanking Democrats with the wealthy, with the highly educated. They are growing that base. The more time people spend in college, the further left they're going to be. And it does seem like now the more money people make and the more wealth they have, it's also more likely they are going to lean the other way. So if you want to see the party thrive, if you want to see that big tent party grow from November, where you saw people shifting to the right amongst urban Americans, Black Americans, Latino Americans, working class Americans who are white, Asian, Latino, and Black, if you want to see that party grow, well, you can't just do the same old thing. You just can't. And then wonder, gosh, why did we get our clocks cleaned in the midterms? You can't do it. A lot of these things are things that Trump talked about on the campaign trail. None of them are all that big a surprise. Do we want to see the markets do what they've done? No, nobody wants that. No one's like cheering that on. But it was always a potential for this to happen based on the policy disruptions that Trump was talking about and now he has implemented. And if it works, well, guess what? He's going to set up his own political party for a generation to come. If it doesn't, then 2026 in the midterms will be ugly. But it's way too early to tell whether or not this is going to work. Steve in KCK. What's up, Steve? You're on KCMO.
Hey, Pete, you're a finance guy. Maybe you can tell me this. You know, tariffs seem to be working for China okay, and they seem to be working for India and the EU, and the rest of the world seems to be doing okay off tariffs. But now that America's going to reciprocate, now all of a sudden it's a bad thing and markets are crashing. You know, it's like, why is it a bad thing when America implements tariffs, but the rest of the world doesn't? It's okay.
Well, listen, I think Wall Street's acting like a teenage girl, to be honest. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. And I also think that this is an excuse for some of the big money people and the hedge funds and things like that to sell out, right? To get out and to maybe buy in at a better price point. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there's an overreaction. But the reality is, too, it is easier for those countries to have the tariffs in place that they have because they've got a lot of this cheap labor, a lot of this cheap manufacturing over there. And, they're not obviously importing from the United States what we are importing from them when it comes to, the types of consumer goods and services that, frankly, this country finds itself way too addicted to, which is cheap labor from China that brings in cheap goods that we all sadly buy on Amazon and Target and Walmart and all these different places. I mean, it's not good. I admit that we do it, but it's not good.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have – you can't call it free trade until there are no tariffs. Right now it's cost trade.
Yeah. No, listen, thank you, Steve. And I think that is something that Trump would like to get to, truly free trade. Now, I don't know if he wants that with China. Frankly, I don't think he does. I don't think he actually just wants to create a zero tariff environment with China. That's just my hunch, my guess. But I think with certain countries, he would say, hey, let's just take the tariffs off the board for all of us here. I think that Trump believes there's money to be made from China on tariffs. But with some of these smaller countries where we have, a lot of our manufacturing come in, Thailand, Vietnam, places like that, I think he's basically just looking for no tariffs across the board. That's what he's looking for.
So no Trump towers at the Great Wall or anything?
No,
I don't, casino there?
I don't think that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
I think we're waiting on maybe, the Gaza Strip Trump Tower first before we start looking at the Great Wall of Trump.
There we go.
That's my guess. Now, tomorrow in Kansas City is a big day. You're going to be going to the polls on a jail tax, and you'll also be going to the polls in Kansas City to approve, potentially, a $474 million bond measure for the Kansas City Public Schools. The plan, of course, is to use that money for facility upgrades and the construction of 2 new schools. But as our good friend Patrick Tuohy at the Show Me Institute wrote in the Kansas City Star, the district claims the money is needed for facility upgrades and the construction of 2 new schools. But taxpayers should ask themselves, has the Kansas City Public Schools earned the public's trust? The numbers tell a troubling story. High spending, dismal results, and a pattern of misleading voters on school finances. If passed, this bond would cost the average homeowner more than $120 per year, on top of already rising property tax bills. For a school district that has not demonstrated responsible spending, that's a steep price for families struggling with affordability in Kansas City. It's really as simple as this. Is it worth it to increase housing costs for poor families to fund a school district in KCPS that has utterly failed? Failed its children, failed its residents, failed the parents of those children. Now, my gut tells me that it will pass because there's no one really lobbying against this publicly. You've got the mayor saying go out there and vote yes on these school bonds tomorrow. You've got a lot of, union enthusiasm, obviously, on the vote yes side. Don't you care about the kids? This stuff usually passes. But if there's ever a year when voters might say, I'm tapped out, I'm done, I'm not voting on this, and by the way, KCPS, you have done nothing to earn this. You have nothing to show that you deserve more money from working Kansas Cityans for your public schools that have been an utter failure for decades now. If there's ever a year that people might surprise the establishment, it could be tomorrow in Kansas City. We'll have more on this coming up throughout the morning on KCMO. I will share my buddy Patrick Tuohy's article that he wrote on this vote coming up tomorrow on my X page at Pete Mundo, and you can see it there. And kudos to the Kansas City Star. I give credit where it's due for allowing him to write this piece as well. Well, you got to give the Trump people this. They are not backing down. They are not hiding after a couple of brutal days for the markets on Thursday and Friday, and the Dow futures are right now down 800 points. But they are, talking to anybody and everybody saying, here's why we're doing this. Here's what's going on with these tariffs. And here's where these negotiations stand. And that is exactly what they need to be doing right now. They need to be doubling down on transparency, doubling down on communication. And this is exactly what you got over the weekend. Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett was on ABC this week. Trust me, no friend to the people in charge of the country right now. But they're going on these shows. They are talking to these hosts and talking to these anchors. And Kevin Hassett shared, I believe, some pretty good news that should be welcomed by all Americans.
Got a report from the USTR last night that more than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
And Kevin Hassett is saying, hey, you've got more than 50 countries that reached out to the president to start their negotiation. And Trump was probably taking these calls as he's debating between a 6 and a 7 iron on, the 14th hole, playing golf over the weekend. And guess what? I'm okay with that because he's multitasking. And if he pulls out the 6 iron instead of the 7 and he hits it a little too long over the green, but he gets a deal done with Vietnam, I'll survive. That's all that matters.
Well, he already knows what he's going to do. It's in his mind. He doesn't need to run it by the committees and all this stuff that the left likes to take. He's just golfing.
Yeah.
He already knows what he wants to do with every single one of them.
That's the amazing part, right? You think about these lifelong bureaucrats who need like 7 committees to come to a conclusion on something. He's running it like a business, like a businessman who's like, I know the number that I want. It's like a negotiation. I know what I'm willing to sell for. This is a very, very rudimentary example. But I'm right now trying to sell a piece of outdoor furniture on Facebook Marketplace, okay? I know what my price point is. I can get a message at any point. People are offering me $100 less, $200 less. I'm like, no, I know what my number is. Trump knows what his number is on these tariffs. He knows what he's willing to get to with some of these countries. So it's not really of interest to me where exactly he's taking the call from, as long as they're calling. All right? I mean, unlike the last guy who was comatose, hobbling along the beaches of Delaware, you know what? We can do 2 things at once around here. Now you've got Scott Bessent, who is the Treasury Secretary. He goes on Meet the Press, and he made one of the more important points that needed to be made to Kristen Welker of Meet the Press. So once again, you've got these top Trump administration officials who are going on to some very unfriendly programs yesterday and making the case for why they're doing what they're doing, knowing full well they are not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Scott Bessent Meet the Press yesterday on prices and what he's expecting to see here in the weeks and potentially months ahead.
Kristen, what I like is data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase. And Kristen, the little publicized story this week, everyone wants to look at the stock market going down. You know what else went down? Oil prices went down almost 15% in 2 days, which impacts working Americans much more than the stock market does. Interest rates hit their low for the year, so I'm expecting the mortgage applications to pick up.
Well, just to be very clear, though, I mean, during President Trump's first terms, the cost to Americans was nearly $80 billion in new taxes due to his tariffs. The prices did go up on everything from washing machines to tires.
Well, no, but let's go back. The aggregate number was 0.7, so we can discern the individual things. Also, households saw real net wages go up. So if wages go up faster than prices, which is not what happened over the past 4 years, that's why the bottom 50% got eviscerated.
That was Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, on Meet the Press yesterday. And that was a number I did not know. Their 20% tariff on China from the first Trump administration, that, let's be very clear, the Biden administration kept in place, led to a 0.7% price increase over 4 years. That is pretty good. Now, China at that point was largely willing to basically subsidize the tariffs. Are they going to be willing to do that now for the future as the trade war picks up? I don't know. But Scott Besson at least has some data to look at instead of just the hysterics of, oh, my gosh, the sky is falling. We're all going to die. The markets are having a really bad couple of days here. Now, oil prices down, that also can be a good thing for regular folks. It also can be a bad thing, right? That can be potentially a sign of a recession. We saw that in, 2008, 2009. If it means that less people are going to be driving, less people are going to be traveling, airlines, whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a broad win for the economy, but it does bring some relief as oil drops to under $60 a barrel. So that's what they're looking at right now. And Donald Trump is also playing the game and doubling down on the constituency that got him elected. And that's not Wall Street. Wall Street has backed the Democrat the last 3 elections when it comes to voting and donations, overwhelmingly, going back to 2016 with Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. So their hysterics have to be taken with a grain of salt here. They just have to be, based on where their allegiance has been politically over the last 10 years or so. It doesn't mean that we want 401ks to go in the toilet, but we are also not going to determine the health of an economy based on the Dow Jones or the S&P or the NASDAQ. Because all you then do, and all we saw happen the last 4 years, is the wealth gap expand between the haves and the have-nots as we printed trillions of dollars that we did not have, that we could not afford to print, and basically create a very frothy equity market that the regular person has no share of. And you would think that even those who didn't vote for Donald Trump could understand that part of it and would be willing to understand that part of it. You would think that that would be a part of the equation. That even if you didn't vote for the guy, you could say, okay, I see what he's going for there. I've got concerns, but I see what he's going for there. Now they've doubled down on being the party of Wall Street. The Occupy Wall Street movement is now the party of Wall Street. Donald Trump says, let's try to build up our middle class and try to bring back as many jobs as we can to this country. And the same people who are screaming about $15 an hour at McDonald's are now suddenly like, no, I like my cheap labor in China. You see, they've got themselves twisted into such a pretzel, and they've really made their entire movement about basically being against whatever Trump is doing, even if it's antithetical to a lot of their own beliefs over the last couple of decades. They just look like a party that is flailing in the wind right now. But Trump ultimately has to have success here. That's what's got to happen. And I am more than willing to give him a shot on this. I've got his back because what we've been doing now for the better part of a generation, basically my entire life, certainly my adult life, has not helped us build a robust middle class in this country. Markets open up in 6 minutes. Keep an eye on what that looks like. Futures for the Dow off 1,000 points. We are giving away Alabama and Lee Greenwood tickets. How about that? Woo! Coming up at 8:45 on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app as always. We are looking forward to giving those away. They are going to be at Azura Amphitheater on Friday, May 23rd. So that
Sandstone for boomers.
Yes, there you go. Azura, Sandstone, T-Mobile, Sprint Center. It's all, one and the same. Exactly. So that's 20 minutes away on 95.7 FM. So, listen, you heard from E.J. Antonia, the Heritage Foundation, last hour. You heard from Charlie Gasparino right there. They've got some concerns on how this tariff thing might end up playing out. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I know this. I voted for a guy for a third straight time who was proven as president to have economic success. What you saw during Trump 1.0 is the wage growth grow at the fastest rate for those at the bottom end of the income bracket. You saw more wealth grow across the income brackets than you've seen in a very long time in this country. And we saw Joe Biden print money left and right that did not work for the average American. It caused inflation, and the rich got richer, and the middle class got screwed. So is this the best way to go about doing it? I don't know. But a large part of me feels like there is an art of the deal going on here where Trump is basically throwing these wild numbers up against the wall. And we can talk all day about whether or not the formula that they rolled out in the Rose Garden last week was the right formula to do reciprocal tariffs. I mean, that is so far in the weeds. I think the broader point here is this is how Trump has negotiated for his entire life. He throws out a crazy number. He overasks. He shocks the system. And then he comes to the negotiating table. And I'm hopeful that's how it's going to play out, but I can't say I know. But we'll see. Mark's in Independence. What's up, Mark? Where are you at right now?
I'll tell you what, I support all this. I'm 68. I've seen the transition of America. I get a little aggravated at people. I understand you look at your 401k and it can get to you a little bit. But my goodness, we have to do something to turn things around. And yes, there's going to be some bad medicine. And I remember back in college in the 80s, I was debating professors then about this free trade stuff. And I always asked them, well, do you have any studies that show that really the middle class is going to really benefit? What jobs we're going to lose? What jobs we're going to gain? They could never produce it.
Yeah.
So, I'm getting tired of it. And there's a song by Alan Jackson called "Little Man." If you ever get a chance, you play it. It describes the sentiment, at least of people my age, who've been laid off 3 and 4 times in their lifetime because the people they were working for moved overseas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you, man. Got a minute for you, Rick in Leavenworth. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, here's what I think. People need to chill out. I say give this 6 months at least. And there are opportunities here. For example, I'm converting a lot of my taxable investments into my Roth IRA. Now's the time to do that. If you're in the long haul and can invest now because it's going to grow. Give it 6 months. That's what I say.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Rick. I appreciate it, my man. And listen, yeah, I mean, if you're younger, if you're sitting there like me, just kind of close your eyes. But it's going to be fascinating. The opening bell in 2.5 minutes. Dow is off 1,300 points to open up trading here this morning. That's 3.5%. S&P off nearly 4%, 193 points. NASDAQ opens up down 636 points. That is 4% this morning on KCMO after, of course, last week, what was the worst week for stocks since March of 2020 at the start of the pandemic. So here we are once again, and this is the roller coaster ride that is continuing for now a second straight week. 913-408-7957. We're giving away those Alabama Lee Greenwood tickets in 10 minutes here on KCMO. They'll be at Azura Amphitheater on May 23rd. Dan's in Prairie Village. Go ahead, Dan. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I wanted to say that people need to, look in the past at the market when it drops 500 to 7,500 points compared to where we're at now. I mean, this could completely change the U.S. economy as far as in a positive light. If we can get the tariffs to where they need to be, people need to not freak out.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Dan. And maybe we're wrong, but I am not backing off it right now.
I agree, and I sent you over a text that 21, 22. I mean, the market dropped from it dropped about 5,000 or 6,000 points back then, and at least there's a reason behind this, which could really be a positive thing in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to that year, and 2022 was a bad year, right, for the markets. Was off about 20% that year.
Yeah, and at least and you scratch your head, and at least now you can look at this and say, okay, well, there's a reason why. And going forward, it's like looking at sports. You got to do conditioning. You got to do running. If you're not playing well, you got to go through some pain, and your team will be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dan, listen, that's obviously the long-term play here by the administration. And the reason that nobody has tried this is because of the political calculation that could be at play as well. On the text line, I've got this here. You can kiss the midterms goodbye. Blue tsunami coming in hot. Okay. All right. That's on the text line.
You mustard moo.
If you think you're predicting November of 26 on April 7th of 25, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. But one of the reasons no one's ever tried this is because of political fear of what it could mean for either their own political prospects in the case of a president or, members of Congress. And frankly, they failed all of us for a generation now. Democrats and Republicans, let's be very clear, have failed all of us for a generation. They seemingly have all done very well. They've taken care of their lobbyists. The suburbs of Washington, D.C. are some of the ritziest, glitziest suburbs in all of America. While regular towns across the country, including here in Kansas and Missouri, in too many cases have been hollowed out. And now they're the ones freaking out over what has been a roller coaster couple of weeks in the markets. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not going to sit here and predict that this is definitely going to be the answer and it's going to be fantastic. You just wait. I don't know. I'm not going to make a fake promise. I do know this for the stock market. At some point, it will come back. It always does. Had a great conversation on Friday with Mark Falter, Retirement Income Hour, Saturday and Sunday mornings at 9. And he's been saying this for months. If you were approaching retirement, you had to get out of equities. You had a great run the last 15 years. Get out, reallocate, take a little off the table. That was on you to prepare for this moment. And if you're someone who's, more in line with me, you buy. If nothing else, you close your eyes. If you can't be buying right now, you close your eyes and you realize you don't lose unless you sell. Let's be very clear. The only way you are losing money is if you sell right now. That's it. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Gladstone. That's where the Musty Moo Moo himself is. Good morning, my man. How are you?
Yeah, good. Well, there's one name I haven't heard thrown around during all this, and that's Dave Ramsey, man. I mean, if you worked hard, didn't get in the trap of keeping up with the Joneses, and are debt-free, you're just sitting back going, hey, I'm fine. There's no problem here. And for older folks like me, if you're still 100% in the market, like you've said, Pete, shame on you. I mean, and all it is, because I remember when the stock market fell in the 1980s, and I remember Sam Walton, they were talking about, oh, you've lost so much money. And like you said, it's just paper. Right now, it's just paper.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit there, keep working hard, doing what you're doing, especially people your age. Keep on keeping on, and you're going to be fine.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Musty. I appreciate that, my man.
You mustard moo.
Always appreciate the insights. There you go. 913-408-7957. That's the text line and the studio line on a Monday morning. Dow is off 5% right now, 1,500 points. S&P off 4%. NASDAQ also off 4.5% this morning as we open up trading. And also of note here, the 10-year Treasury yield falling below 4%. Jerome Powell noting that he believes higher tariffs are likely to end up raising inflation. If I saw this here in the last few minutes correctly, the Fed has announced a closed board meeting today. Yeah, here it is. The Federal Reserve has announced a closed board meeting today that is coming up at 10:30 Central Time this morning. So there's also going to be pressure to cut rates here. And one of the strategies that Donald Trump is trying to implement in all this is once again a reset of the economy that works better for the middle class. His thought process is in part is that we can get interest rates down. What does that do? That allows people to refinance their homes. That allows people to access potentially their own equity that they've had locked up in their homes for a very long time at a lower rate. That potentially helps, as much as we've talked a lot about the car market and the car industry potentially getting hurt with tariffs. That could very well help the car industry and help them unload some of these vehicles they've been sitting on while interest rates have been very high. That can be beneficial. It will be much more beneficial for the average person if you get interest rates down than if you worry about, a 401k right now who's for somebody who's 42 years old. And Charlie Gasparino had a great statistic that he shared on the show earlier this hour. The average 401k is $130,000. So you're talking about a 20% drop from the high. So that's, someone who's from $130,000 now down to $108,000. He says the median 401k is about $50,000. So half the people are above 50, half are below 50. That's the median 401k per Charlie Gasparino this morning. They are not having the same conversations that hedge fund managers are having right now. And the other fascinating part of the markets the last couple of days, late last week, it was two of the biggest days for retail investors in the country's history. Retail investors, that's you, that's me, were buying on Thursday and Friday. Hedge funds were unloading. Hedge funds were stacking up cash. Retail investors were buying. I don't want to read into that too much, but what that tells me is that regular people are actually trusting the process. Wall Street isn't. Hedge funds aren't. And they may have their reasons. Listen, they're playing a different game than you're playing buying a few shares of Apple right now or NVIDIA or Amazon or whatever. But that is a fascinating overlooked storyline of the last couple of days, that the retail investor is seeing this as a buying opportunity, while hedge funds are taking money off the table and moving into cash due to the uncertainty. All right, it's 8:44. It is your first chance this week to win Alabama Lee Greenwood tickets. Azura Amphitheater coming up on Friday, May 23rd. 7th caller right now to 913-408-7957 is going to win those tickets to see Alabama and Lee Greenwood at Azura Amphitheater all week long. We've got those for you right here on 95.7 FM KCMO. And as always, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, who's been behind the protest, the hands-off protest that took place over the weekend here in Kansas City and in all 50 states around the country? Well, you're not going to be shocked by it, but we'll tell you who, and we've got the numbers to back it up next. So we had these protests, these absurdly ridiculous, childish protests that took place over the weekend. It was called the hands-off protest. We had them right here in Kansas City as well. And a lot of you probably wondering, who's behind these protests? Well, there was a group called Indivisible Project that was on Rachel Maddow's show late last week, bragging about their participation in coordinating these protests. So a quick search at OpenSocietyFoundations.org shows that you're going to be shocked, all right? Finish your coffee. You're going to be shocked by this. George Soros has given millions of dollars to the Indivisible Project over the year.
Talk about a bombshell.
I know. You cannot fathom the idea that George Soros has funded coordinated protests around America in the wake of Doge, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and everything happening in this country over the last couple of months. In fact, George Soros made his largest donation to the Indivisible Project in the last couple of years of $3 million. He's given them a total of about, 3, 2, 5, that's 6. He's given them over $7 million going back to 2017. So are you surprised by that at all? I'm not. And no one listening is going to be shocked. Even those of you who support these protests, come on now. You're not shocked by this one bit. And then when you hear some of the protesters over the weekend, it was exactly what you would have expected. Shall we roll the tape? Yeah, let's do it. KCTV 5.
Hundreds of protesters took to the Country Club Plaza calling for President Trump to get his hands off.
We're here to save our democracy and to stop the tariffs.
Save our democracy with George Soros' hard-earned money. And stop the tariffs.
Protesters say they are fed up with policies that went into effect during Trump's administration, and this is how they are fighting back.
Tariffs are wrecking the total globe, not just our United States. They are taxes.
Immigration, DEI, and workers' rights appear in bold letters on the signs of demonstrators, representing what they are trying to protect. This comes as mass deportations continue, with hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants awaiting their fate at a maximum security prison in El Salvador.
Overall, if what's going on right now doesn't impact you, if you aren't heartbroken by people being basically disappeared or kidnapped off the streets, with little or no due process, I think, where's your humanity at that point?
Yeah, I hate when those gang members who are in the country illegally
hate it when that happens.
Just kind of disappear from the country. Boy, that is really a disappointment, said nobody ever. At least nobody who doesn't, have the dopey yard sign sitting on their front lawn. In this house, we believe no human is illegal. But I like my ritzy neighborhood where I don't allow anybody else to move in next door unless they pass the smell test.
Yeah, Pete, but a tariff's a tax.
I know.
Boy, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that,
Mm-hmm.
So now the tariffs are their big thing as well, that they are protesting down on the plaza. The reality is they're not protesting anything other than Orange Man bad. And they are just basically, it's like when my toddlers are, drawing something and they're learning how to draw. It's just kind of a lot of colors, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. They're certainly not coloring within the lines. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Claire's getting pretty darn good at it. She appears to maybe have some artistic talent. But certainly not Chloe. She's 3. And forget the 1-year-old. So she's just kind of drawing and making colors and drawing colors over colors and hoping something sticks. And I will tell her, "Oh, Chloe, that looks fantastic. Great job. You're coming along." Because she's a 3-year-old and I'm trying to build up her confidence. These people on the plaza may act like they're 3. They may pretend to be 3 years old. Their arguments are just as persuasive as a 3-year-old, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it with them because guess what? They're adults. And they look like children. So they're there to protest DOGE and tariffs and federal cuts and this and that. And the only common theme in their protests and in their arguments is Trump. That's it. That's all they got. The problem for them is that Trump, while still not being as popular as some of his policies are, is historically more popular than he has been, or his approval rating is higher. I would say that's different than popularity. His approval rating is higher than it ever was during his first term. So they're running the same playbook from really 2017 to 2020. And I don't think we're in a place where it's going to work the same way.
Some protesters raised concerns about affordable health care.
I'm worried about our seniors who they're trying to take Medicaid from and things like that, and our veterans. And so all of the things that he's doing is going to impact the people who are middle class or at the bottom.
Thoughts of the future were top of mind for others.
Especially important for me and my daughter because I want to make sure that she has the opportunity to vote and is not kept from the polls for something like the SAVE Act.
Many voices came together for several causes, and they say it doesn't stop here.
We're asking the community not to hide, to stand up for what the United States believes in, which is democracy.
How about the Karen dunk at the end? I hope my daughter can vote one day. Take a chill pill there, Karen. It's going to be all right. I apologize to all the Karens out there, but you've given me no choice in the matter. All right? These Karens are killing you. You got to love the lady that shows up on the plaza with her kid on a Saturday. I hope my 3-year-old can vote one day. I don't know, under this guy, he's going to be a dictator, and I'm not going to be able to have my kids vote. Man. it really, I do, a part of me does feel bad for these people. I really do, John. It's a tough way to go.
If they want to help out, they could get a second weekend job instead of being the bourgeoisie out on the plaza.
That's a good point as well. But hey, got to go to Starbucks after the big protest, you know?
That's right.